So we have the Democrats crafting another coronavirus bailout bill or stimulus bill or whatever you want to call it. And now this one isn't going anywhere. It's not going anywhere because the Republicans are basically like, yeah, we're donezo. We're not doing it anymore. But what I want to give you here is a timeline of exactly what happened with this bill, how the provisions came about, what provisions made it in the bill. And so here's Crystal Ball from Rising on the Hill, laying out in detail what made the bill, what didn't make the bill, and all that stuff, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Yesterday, House Dems unveiled their latest relief legislation, and it's really something. Now, first, let's stipulate, it is definitely better than what the Senate GOP is offering, which is literally nothing except, of course, corporate liability shield protection so that corporations who put their workers at risk can rest easy that they cannot be sued. And let me also stipulate that there are some worthwhile things in here, extending the $600 unemployment insurance plus up. There's some money for hazard pay for frontline workers, though, frankly, the amount seems woefully insufficient. There's some aid to state and local governments. There's an expansion of various tax credits and deductions that would be a useful thing. There's a SNAP increase as families struggle to put food on the table. There are also some inexcusable things. Saagar's going to be covering some of that today. The SALT cap tax deduction made it in, which overwhelmingly, of course, benefits the rich. The lobbyist bailout made it in. Not joking. Aid for landlords made it in. In other words, there was really something for everyone, except one very notable group, progressives. Now, it's important to understand the context of this bill. We told you at the beginning of this crisis that corporatist leaders in Washington, Mitch McConnell chief among them, will only feel pressure to do anything for the working class if their pain is affecting stock market performance. Having already passed their corporate theft bill and with the stock market doing just fine, the Trump White House and the Senate GOP are feeling perfectly comfortable where things are and are pivoting to their deficit hawk messaging. So this House Dem bill is really nothing more than a messaging bill. It's policy as theater. There are no real stakes here. The GOP is not even negotiating with Democrats right now. It's all about sending a message to the donor class that you got their backs, and it's about a parade of virtue signaling for the public so you can credibly say things would be so much better if the GOP had just gone along with your plan. Now, what I've been told is that establishment Dems are very eager to win over and excite the left of the party. Joe Biden's the next FDR, after all, guys. I've also been told that Democrats really want to be champions of small businesses and the working class. It's just those bad old Republicans standing in the way. Well, since this bill has no chance of getting through the Senate anyway, there's no constraints from the right. You could put together whatever your absolutely ideal package would be. And so what did Pelosi choose very specifically and deliberately to do? She decided to send a message by explicitly excluding the left's most important priorities. There is no temporary universal health care to deal with the fact that millions are losing their insurance in the midst of a pandemic. In fact, instead, there's a provision to help with COBRA, which is just basically a health insurance company giveaway. There's no recurring UBI payments through the duration of the crisis, even though wild-eyed socialists like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris even support that idea at this point. And most pointedly, there is no paycheck guarantee program in the bill, which would effectively nationalize payrolls of small businesses so that we could avoid further job losses the way that many other countries have done. According to Politico, now while this proposal has found fairly broad support among Democrats and is very popular with the American public, Politico reports that Pelosi, working with House Ways and Means Chair Richie Neal, decided it was just too complicated and too expensive to be put in the bill. A ridiculous notion given that A, you had no problem with the $4 trillion for big business, and B, the bill's not going anywhere anyway. But even a purely symbolic victory for the left was apparently too much for Pelosi. She needs them to know fully and completely that they do not matter and are wholly irrelevant. It's not enough for Pelosi and co. to have all of the power. They need to thoroughly humiliate the left as well, to put the elected leaders representing that part of the party in their place and send a message to all the young people and Walmart workers and Amazon warehouse workers to never try to exercise power ever again. Now, I will say that progressives are really showing Pelosi who's boss by sending a moderately worded letter demanding that the bill be postponed so they have more time to think about all the ways that they've been rolled, I guess. They're advising progressive caucus membership to indicate they are undecided on the bill. Exactly the sort of wishy-washy half threat that will likely only end in another chance for embarrassment.
So this is the left's idea of fighting back. You just heard it. That's what they're doing. They sent a letter to Pelosi, and Pramila Jayapal, I think she said she's not voting for it, but the recommendation to the rest of the Progressive Caucus was to say you're undecided. And they're like, let's postpone the bill while we think about it more or whatever. And it's like, this is, I'm not kidding, this is their idea of like, this is how we fight back. We say we're mostly undecided, and can you please postpone the bill just a little bit longer, please? It's so sad. It really is so sad. So Crystal laid it out for you there in great detail, but just to run through some of the stuff that's not in there again. There's no UBI. There is talk, and I'm not even UBI for the duration of the crisis. That's not in there. There's just another one-time $1,200 payment. Not nearly enough. There's no government takeover of payroll like they have in many European countries and Scandinavian countries where, you know, the government says like, okay, we'll pick up 75 to 80% of workers' wages for the remainder of the crisis. As they're furloughed, they'll get 75 to 80% of their checks. And then when we get back to some semblance of normalcy and they go back to work, then, you know, the businesses take back over payroll. That's the one that Pramila Jayapal was like, I want this in the bill. I need this in the bill. And when it wasn't in the bill, she was like, okay, well then I'm going to send you a letter, as Crystal said, a moderately worded letter, and then, you know, recommend that the Progressive Caucus say they're undecided. And then also, there's no Medicare for all. There's not even temporary universal coverage or temporary coverage for things involving COVID-19. And this is where we are. There is hazard pay, but it's not nearly enough. And so the bill it's like a pre-compromise bill. What Pelosi did is she pre-compromised. She compromised up front with the right. And then Mitch McConnell has already said, we're not doing Dickie McGee's acts. This thing is donezo. It's going to die. So why even do the pre-compromise? But there's our answer. Because she doesn't agree with the left. It's obvious. She doesn't agree with the left. Nancy Pelosi does not agree with the left. Her actual beliefs are, let's pre-compromise. What's in that bill is what she's okay with. And remember, the first group of people that got bailed out in the first coronavirus bill when the shit really hit the fan, what did they do? They rushed in and they basically gave a blank check to corporate America and to Wall Street, and the Fed jumped in and was pumping $1 trillion of liquidity per day into the markets to shore them up. And the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, now gets to determine where all this bailout money goes to all these different corporations. That was the very first thing they did. Help the corporations, help the corporations, help the corporations. No concerns about the deficit. No saying, I don't know if this is possible. It might be a little too complicated. No. They just let them loot the Treasury. End of conversation. Now we're on our fifth bill? Sixth bill? Something like that? And still we're talking about crumbs for regular people. Listen, if you're not doing either UBI or taking over payroll like in Europe, where government pays 75 to 80% of wages, or covering the healthcare costs, you're totally useless. You're totally useless. We had about 28 million people with no health insurance prior to this crisis. Now we might add another 43 million people on top of that. We have a healthcare crisis in this country. In a pandemic, people are losing their healthcare. And their response was, let's do subsidies to Cobra, which is just a giveaway to the health insurance companies. Guys, the corporate lobbyist bailout made it into this bill, but UBI's not in there, and the government taking over payroll is not in there, and healthcare is not in there. This is a sick joke, and the best we got in terms of fighting back was Pramila Jayapal saying either she's undecided or she's going to vote no. Let me write a letter to Pelosi and let me tell the rest of the Progressive Caucus, hey, say you're undecided. Here's an idea. How about you say, hell no, we're not going to support this. We're going to vote no on it. And also, we're going to call a press conference and shame our leaders. In the press conference, you go out there and say, listen, we all know the Republicans aren't in favor of doing Dickie McGee's acts to help regular people, so they're not off the hook here by any stretch of the imagination. But us Democrats have the House. Why are we not passing UBI? Why are we not passing the government taking over payroll? Why are we not passing universal health care, at least for the duration of the crisis, at least for bills involving COVID? Why are we not doing that? What will it take for progressives to call out their own leaders? Listen, 90% of Congress is corrupt and or stupid, but the 10% that aren't are massively weak. They're giant cucks. I hate to say it, but it's true. By the way, you gave away all your leverage in the first bill. Because the first bill, that's the stuff, oh my God, my hair's on fire. We need to bail out these corporations and we need to just let Wall Street loot the Treasury and the financial institutions loot the Treasury. We have to act now. That is when you say, oh, really? Oh, what is it that you want so bad? What is it that you need? Oh, really? Oh, you need a bailout for corporations? Is that what you need? Well, that's interesting because I have over here UBI and universal health care. Maybe we can make some sort of deal, but you're going to have to do UBI and universal health care now, aren't you? It's the only way that you're going to get it through. If the progressives were organized and there was strong leadership and they came together and they voted as a block and they all got on the same page and they all said, listen, we have the power because we're fighting for the people. So if Pelosi or the Republicans screw the people, all one of us has to do is call a press conference. All one of us has to do is point out that they're screwing the people. And then, holy hell will rain down on them. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has the biggest Twitter following of any member of Congress. Is she using that to directly call out Pelosi and say, what are you doing? She could use the fact that she has so many followers to call out Pelosi, tell them to call her office, use the power of the people. If you came to Washington, D.C. as an outsider, you have to remain an outsider to have any power. You're never going to win, being a technocratic manager behind the scenes, pulling the levers of power. That's not your game. That's the game of the neoliberal corporatists. That's where they derive their power from being technocrats, from working within the system. You get your power from being outsiders. You get your power from harnessing the will of the people. So you have to use that. Use the tools that you have. You don't have the backroom deals that they have. All you have is the people. So if the Progressive Caucus got together and said, we're going to vote against everything and we're going to call you out directly unless and until you help the people, that would be amazingly powerful and their approval rating would go up and they would be the strongest faction to be reckoned with in Washington, D.C. This is how the Tea Party functioned. They got up there, they were like, we don't like John Boehner. Yes, he's the Republican leader. So we have our own caucus over here. We have the Freedom Caucus. This is the Tea Party caucus. We don't agree with John Boehner. So we're going to call him out whenever the hell we want. And they're going to reckon with us because we have numbers here. They have to reckon with us to get anything done. Throw your weight around. What are you doing? Let me ask you a question. We have a Democratic House. Why hasn't a clean UBI bill been passed? Forget about, coronavirus bailout bill number, whatever they're on, 12.3, because they love to do the point thing. It was like 4.5 or something recently. Forget about all that. Why haven't Democrats, since they control the House, passed a clean UBI bill? Now, a bunch of them have proposed it. The numbers are rising steadily on a regular basis. Why hasn't there been a vote on it? Why haven't they allowed a clean UBI bill? Okay, listen, guys. Putting aside the policy of it, obviously I think it's good policy. Think about it from a politics perspective. If Nancy Pelosi allowed a vote on the UBI bill, if they got all together, all the Democrats, and said, we're all going to vote this through, then they do vote it through. It passes the House. Then it goes to the Senate. And Mitch McConnell's like, okay, I'm going to vote this down. And Trump is like, now I'm against the UBI payment. I'm against the $2,000 a month. Boom. Boom. That alone, you crush in the next election. Because every time you give an interview, you don't ever have to shut up about that. Oh, I know the American people are struggling. Believe me, I know. I just passed a bill to give every single American $2,000 a month, every month for the duration of the crisis. That's what I did. That's what we did. That's how much we care about regular people. We passed a bill to give you $2,000 a month until the end of the crisis. Every month for this crisis, no questions asked, $2,000. We passed it. We voted on it. We passed it. It got through. And then Mitch McConnell blocked it because he doesn't care about regular people. He cares about corporations and he cares about the rich. He's a giant sellout. He's corrupt. He's a corporate tool. That's what he did. And then Donald Trump, Mr. Oh, look at me, I'm the outsider, I'm anti-establishment. He's against it too. He's against it too. What happened? I thought you're for the regular people. Donald Trump himself said, the forgotten men and women of America will never be forgotten again. Well, it looks like you forgot him now, didn't you, son? It looks like you forgot him. So if you pass it, again, putting the policy aside, because obviously they don't believe in that because it's good policy and they don't believe in good policy. Oh, please, Nancy Pelosi believing in good policy. But put that aside. If just for messaging reasons, they said, we're going to pass a clean UBI. Do you understand the PR victory you have with that? But instead, no. She's a neoliberal corporatist, so she does half agree with the Republicans all the time. And so she pre-compromised, did a watered-down bill, pissed off the entire left. The left's idea of fighting back is a moderately worded letter. Why are you not calling a press conference? Call a press conference and say Nancy Pelosi is blocking UBI. And if she keeps blocking UBI, we're going to make sure she never hears the end of it until the end of her damn career. How you like them apples? They never use their leverage. They never throw around their weight. We're on bill number 5 or something, and they barely made a whimper. And now they finally make a whimper, but the recommendation is say you're undecided? No, say you're against it. Here's why I'm against it. And Nancy Pelosi is the problem, and she's not allowing UBI in there. She's not allowing the government to take over payroll. She's not allowing universal health care. She's the problem, just like the Republicans are the problem. But if you say that, leadership might turn on you, and leadership might be against you, and leadership might take revenge and retribution against you behind the scenes. To which I respond, good. Then you call that out too, because you have the people on your side and you never goddamn use them because you think you're going to outmaneuver her in a technocratic way behind the scenes when you're not. That's her game. Nancy Pelosi is the Michael Jordan of technocratic managing behind the scenes. You can't defeat her on that turf. You have to take her to your turf. Your turf is populism and the people on my side, and I'm going to use that and throw around my weight. For God's sake, be smart about this, man. Be smart about this. They never call out their own. Doesn't matter how bad they are. Doesn't matter how bad they are. Nancy Pelosi could do anything. And the strongest we'll get is a moderately, as Crystal put it, a moderately worded letter and say, okay, everybody, can you please tell them that you're undecided on this bill and maybe we can postpone it for a little bit before we end up falling in line and doing exactly what Pelosi says anyway. I'd really appreciate that. Please don't yell at me. This is what we get. The Progressive Caucus is not like what the so-called Freedom Caucus was, the Tea Party Caucus was. If they were, they'd be a hell of a lot more effective.